as was said, I'm transitioning roles at the moment, and I'm in reflective mood about what it means to be who I am in the context of Canada. So let me just tell you a bit about myself. I am, I was born in Toronto, but soon after was taken back to Ghana, where I spent about 5 or 6 of my earliest years before coming back to Toronto again. And, in between that, as you can imagine, my parents came in the 70s. And I often tell people this story that I just very recently found out, that the way they met was that one day we come from a small town in Ghana called Sekondi, and my father was, he was homeless in Africa, but managed to wrangle his way through to a visa and didn't want to go alone. So my mother's walking down the street. You're getting where this story is going. And so here they were. To make a long story short, here they were. And very early on, so many of you, my mother through, and we all, some of us will be familiar with the story, maybe others of us not so much, but, came as everybody else does and started in factory work before finding the glory of, housework, before finding the glory of hotel work, before finally deciding after many years of struggling that it was time to retrain. And through that retraining has, managed to land herself well into her 80s. Exactly. She didn't come young. But and hence the rapidness of the whole get here. But in the meantime, had me while she was here. And, as an only child, definitely felt, and you have to, if any of you are African, and if any of you, are, a first generation arrived in Canada, you appreciate how hard it is to be a single parent raising a child in circumstances where you're not making a lot of money. But she was determined. She was determined. And also proud, a proud Ghanaian, as with all of my family, right? So there was never a desire for me to assimilate, right? And so hence going backwards and forwards and the rest of it. But to cut a long story short, at some point in my teens, I find myself very aware of what it means to be an African, and, not just slightly black, right? With a pretense to want to make life better for people like me, right? And, I'm 2 generations, there's 2 generations after me, and for sure, it was a hard road. But for some reason decided, what? As with so many before me, I'm gonna make some kind of a difference. And I care about who I am, I care about the color of my skin, but I also care about the right to have access to the same things everybody else does. And so I'm gonna figure out how to do that. And so I very soon left and went to London. And I have to tell you, I loved it there. And I loved it there even now with all of the business that's going on with, how difficult that society is. I loved it there. And the reason I loved it there is because I felt like I knew the rules. There was your upper class, and there was your middle class, and there was your working class, and there were your white people and your brown people and everybody had a history, but everybody had ownership of what it meant to be British because we were a part of a commonwealth. And I liked that. There was something about that I found very appealing. So, and I'll tell you the part of the reason I found it appealing was because It had room for who I was as a Ghanaian, and it had room for who I wanted to be in the context of where I found myself, which is, somebody who could achieve like the people around me. And I have to say, I set off on that path quite particularly, and I have never compromised. But can I say it's been easy? Absolutely no way. And I say that it isn't constantly difficult. It absolutely is. Can I certainly say that for the most part, there's nowhere I've ever been, no job I've ever had where I haven't thought, I gotta make the condition of Black people better. How is this situation gonna help me do that? And to some extent suffered for it every single time. And yet do it again. And suffer for it. And do it again. Almost accepting the fact, and I'll tell you what I accepted. So for a while, I ran, it was an organization, but it was an organization that provided free advice to anybody that wasn't white. And, we were all smart, but we were making it up as we went along, for sure. But, if you didn't have anything, we were better than nothing. So we all set about trying to figure out the law. And in doing that, we kind of realized, no matter who you are, for some reason, the story feels the same. The structures feel the same. You just fill it in with a different, not white person. So decided then, okay, well, I'm going to fight the good fight. And for about 25, maybe now closer to 30 years, that's all I've done. And definitely have decided that the only way that that's going to happen is if I have access to some lever of power. And definitely, for sure, being Black, talking about Black things and trying to make change is very hard. It's hard. The assumptions are hard. The lack of trust is hard. The not being taken seriously is hard. So what I learned to do was just work quick and just turn things around really quickly so that before you realize it's hard, I've done what I've had to do. Move on to the next thing. So in saying all of that, mostly what I want to say to you now is that for a lot of us, 2-3 generations after the first group of people that have come, we also feel like we have some rights to power. We ain't going backwards. I was just telling somebody what it's like when I go back to Ghana. Like so many who have, lived somewhere not where their family are from. And people look at me and they're like, yeah, no, you're not, you're Canadian. I say, well, and the first thing people do, they look at my hands, right? Because it's like, oh, you know what? You haven't worked, and it's true, by the way. You haven't worked the way we've had to work to call yourself who we are anymore, because we struggle, even though it's not necessarily true. Never mind, it's, everybody lives their life, right? And their experience is their experience. That struggle is real. It's real. And no matter how annoyed I get every single time, I know there's some vague element of truth to it, that their struggle is different from my struggle. We have struggles, they're just different struggles. And so I just really want to conclude by saying, for many of you in this room, I'm thankful because I remember what it was like to grow up in this city and to have a community like you work hard so that I could experience some of the opportunities I've had to be able to do what I've done. And so I thank you very much.
Come on, guys, do better than that. Come on. On behalf of Local 79, we thank you for being here with us tonight.